Good evening. I'd like to welcome everybody to the December 2nd River Falls Planning Commission meeting. First thing we'll do is stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Mr. Mayor,
What?
January 6th.
What did I say?
You said the 2nd of December.
Oh, I'm sorry. Jeez. I'm looking at the wrong one. It's okay. January 6th Planning Commission meeting.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks.
Okay. Let's do a roll call.
Holtkamp, Gormanson,
Here.
Moody, Odine,
Here.
Prendergast, Woolsey.
Here.
Thanks, Becky. Next, move on to approval of the minutes. We have minutes from the December 2nd Plan Commission workshop and the Plan Commission meeting. I'll take a motion on those.
So moved.
Second.
First and second on the minutes. Comments or questions? Too much time off.
You're right.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, this is where if there's anybody in the audience has anything they'd like to talk about, now would be the time. Come on up. Make sure you sign in.
Patricia LaRue, 489 Marcella Court, and I'm here to talk about the strategy of and planning of the housing that we've been discussing, and the two of you who are on City Council have heard about it enough, I'm sure. But what I want to say is when the staff puts up on the screen or sets out a plan, and there's these plots and there's these little squares, what I think people aren't realizing is that each of those squares has a door, and behind that door is a family, and that family chose to move to River Falls. They know what the setbacks are of their property, they know what the size is, but yet they choose to come here and get the housing that they can afford. And I think all of us, I don't know how many of you own houses, but I know when we bought our first house, I didn't care how big it was. I had 4 walls, I had privacy. Maybe I had a smaller yard than other people did, but I had my own house. And I don't know how many of you are in my situation, but there's plenty of times where Brian and I will go on vacation and we'll be in this nice little compartment, and I will say to myself, this is all I need. I don't need 4 bedrooms. I don't need a huge yard. So I can appreciate people who do not want us to continually make adjustments to what we have decided in our ordinances. But there's an appropriate time to have a smaller development for people who just want affordable housing and 4 walls. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Anybody else? Okay, we'll move on to ordinances. Proposed ordinance amendments to Title 17 zoning, Chapter 17.04, 17.08, 17.20, 17.24, 17.28, 17.44, 17.48, 17.64, 17.73, and 1780. And I'm not going to keep going on. I'll let Emily give us a little presentation on this first, and we can go back to that.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Plan Commissioners. I'm Emily Shively, the Assistant Director of Community Development. In December, Plan Commission held a workshop to talk about potential amendments to the ordinance as part of comprehensive plan implementation. And they recommended moving forward and bringing them to the January regular meeting, and here we are. I also want to begin by acknowledging Harley Melhorn, our senior planner, who has done the lion's share of the work on these amendments, but he was not able to be here this evening. I'm going to cover most of the same ground that we did during the workshop, which will be a review for most of the commissioners, but it's important to provide context for those who may be watching this evening. So I'll review the comprehensive plan guidance that undergirds this effort, go over the data analysis that provided a foundation for the recommendations, and then dive into the potential ordinance amendments. So as a reminder, the comprehensive plan has an implementation chapter and a section for each of the major elements of the comprehensive plan. For the purpose of these ordinance amendments, we're focusing on items from the housing and land use elements. The first item we've selected to update is to update the zoning code to support land use categories of the land use chapter, specifically with regard to residential development standards. And then the two housing items we've selected align with the land use item. One is to update the zoning ordinance to support density and development that accommodates missing middle housing. And what that is are things like townhomes, duplexes, triplexes. And another is to consider the adoption of alternative housing options, such as accessory dwelling units or ADUs. So kind of as we work on implementing the comprehensive plan, this is a helpful diagram to understand how policies and regulations stack. So at the lower level here in green, is the most flexibility in defining and creating policies. After that, policies and processes become more defined with less discretion and more certainty. At the top of the diagram are permits and processes that have the least discretion and are most specific as to requirements. So again, at the bottom, policy is being created and is driven by community goals. Working upward, policy is being implemented and applied through regulations. At the top are permits that are reviewed for compliance with policy and regulation and are issued typically administratively if they meet all requirements. Another essential element in implementing community goals is partnership with the private sector. And that includes builders and developers, businesses and employers, and also residents. Few cities actually build projects, so development typically occurs as a partnership between a community and a developer or builders. In order for a development project to be successful, it needs to be feasible in these 5 areas. Financial feasibility means that the project can be financed effectively. Market feasibility is tied to that in that there needs to be sufficient market demand to make the project feasible. The site also has to have appropriate physical characteristics to support the use. And the project also must be legally feasible and meet the community's regulatory and policy goals. And finally, the project needs to be politically feasible and have the support of the community and its elected representatives. One of the main jobs of a developer is to manage risk. Each of these elements have different components of risk. Wherever there can be more certainty, there can be lower risk, and typically a more feasible and potentially more affordable project. So to begin to formulate an approach towards achieving the goals laid out by the comp plan, we began by collecting data. We collected data on our existing neighborhoods and their conformance to the size standards of the code. We looked at the location of our missing middle housing typology, where we already have that, and then including the location and number of units of those. We reviewed the development standards that recent developments have had, and the majority of those were approved via the planned unit development process, which provided flexibility from the underlying zoning standards. Also key to this is our tracking based on the housing needs analysis, which was initially conducted in 2018, updated in 2022, and will be updated again this year in 2026. So when looking at lot size standards, we started with the R1 single-family low-density residence districts, shown in the light yellow on the zoning map to the right. One of the interesting things we discovered is the average R1 single-family lot size is around 11,500 square feet, and the average R1 duplex lot size, so a two-family home, is only slightly larger at about 12,900 square feet. So double the units on roughly the same area. There were not many existing single-family lots in R1 that were not conforming as to size. We also looked at the number of homes in the neighborhood to see what our existing net density is in the city. So this diagram shows that even though most single-family homes are on lots of at least 7,500 square feet, looking at the number of homes in the neighborhood, we see that there are very few areas with single-family homes that are under 3 dwelling units per acre. Most are between 3 and 12 dwelling units per acre. Areas with lower residential densities typically contain unbuildable areas on the lot, such as steep slopes or floodplains. The lighter color shows places where there are under 3 homes per acre, then it goes up 3 to 6, 6 to 12, 12 to 18, and then greater than 18 dwelling units per acre. So those higher densities are partially due to the mix of housing types in our existing neighborhoods. Code currently allows for duplexes in R1, provided they have a 1,400-foot separation from each other or exist in larger developments not to exceed 2 acres. The existing stock of duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes in R1 illustrates that these provisions have not been adhered to in the oldest and most established parts of the city. The average separation between duplexes across the city is only 158 feet, far less than the code requirement. The existing stock of missing middle also blends well into the streetscape, does not generate a higher level of complaints regarding traffic or other density factors compared to purely single-family areas. And the natural development of the city lended itself towards integrated mixed housing densities and provides a template for how we may continue to structure the ordinance going forward to continue that development pattern. This diagram converts that previous one, the density of duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes, to a heat map where sort of clear patterns of clustering appear. There are generally 2 major clusters of R1 missing middle housing, one proximal to City Hall, both north and south of Division, and then the other between Division and Cascade on the east side of Main. Again, these are areas zoned R1. Areas where duplexes are permitted in R2 and R3 or by PUD aren't shown. So this is meant to illustrate that even in areas of traditional single-family neighborhoods, other housing types have historically been well integrated. And here are a few photos of what we mean by missing middle. So these are all 4-unit buildings located in existing R1 neighborhoods in River Falls. Some have been converted from single-family homes, added onto, others were built as multifamily homes. So turning from older neighborhoods to more recent developments, flexibility regarding lot size, lot width, and setbacks has been requested and granted via PUD, planned unit development, for these neighborhoods in the city over time. In each of these neighborhood developments, the determination was made that the project met the goals of the comprehensive plan, the general intent of the ordinances, and was in alignment with our comp plan. However, flexibility was requested in order to make these neighborhoods feasible. And similar flexibility regarding parking, setbacks, and particularly open space has been requested and granted via planned unit development for these 11 multifamily projects in the city in the past 6 years. In each of these, the determination was also made that the project met the goals of the community, the general intent of the ordinances, and was in alignment with the comprehensive plan, but still flexibility was needed for project feasibility. And then I also want to note that flexibility has been granted specifically to meet the housing needs in the community. So as I mentioned earlier, we've been tracking progress towards meeting the housing needs identified in the housing studies. And currently, an additional 313 multifamily for rent units are still needed by 2030. An additional 258 single family and 81 twin homes are needed by 2030. And then further, 693 senior housing units are still needed, and some of those could be provided in new single family, 2-family, or multifamily neighborhoods. So this just shows that we're making progress. That darker blue says we are adding units, but that total bar is how many are needed altogether. And then, like I said, we're updating the housing study right now, and we'll see kind of where we're at with those numbers moving forward. So back to planned unit developments, it's a tool that's helpful for providing flexibility, but going back to that star of feasibility, it also creates uncertainty for the developer and the community, and it can lengthen the approval process. So in analyzing the flexibility the city has granted via PUD over time, we've identified areas where the same types of flexibility have been granted. Essentially, each of those approvals set a new zoning standard, creating policy. So back to that bottom of the zoning pyramid. The proposed ordinance amendments are intended to move the approvals up the pyramid where there's more certainty, more specificity, less discretion, less risk. So expectations would be known by both the community and the developer. And then another impetus for codifying these is to ensure that we're treating proposals equally and not arbitrarily approving some developments, but not others that are substantially similar. So this would preserve constitutional rights of equal treatment and due process. So the key takeaways from data collection are that lot size, setbacks, and housing type are areas where our ordinance is out of alignment with the comprehensive plan and current development feasibility. So we also found that scaling lot size differently across housing types in R1, R2, and R3 would be consistent with existing missing middle development patterns and may provide additional opportunities for more of this type of housing in new and existing neighborhoods. So we've concluded that amending the ordinance based on this data and on policy decisions that have already been made via the PUD process aligns with the comprehensive plan implementation goals and can make the development process more certain for both the community, landowners, and development partners, which may make development more financially feasible, which then can work towards meeting our housing affordability goals. So any questions on the data? Some of you saw this about a month ago, but you've had a month to sit with it too. So, all right, I'll keep going, but let me know if you have questions. So in this next section, I'll go over the proposed ordinance amendments and then wrap up with some other amendments that staff is recommending based on issues that have popped up over time. So here are the three main areas of the residential ordinance amendments. I'll dive into them into more detail. And then in the packet is a copy of the draft ordinance amendments, which give you a look at what those policy changes look like if they're going to be incorporated into the ordinance. There's also a chart in the packet that provides a broad overview of the changes to the residential standards. So you can kind of see in one place what's staying the same and what's recommended to change. So starting with accessory dwelling units, here are the main elements of that ordinance. We researched other cities' codes as well as best practices that have been identified to remove barriers to this type of housing while balancing the integration of these homes into the neighborhoods. These standards are meant to ensure that accessory dwelling units are accessory to the main use on the property. And most of these units are either built as a freestanding structure in the rear yard or as a separate housing unit in the principal structure. So we've got performance standards there for access, size, again, relating to the main structure, and then making sure that we've got the minimum room sizes per building code for health and safety. Any questions on ADUs? Okay. For the other changes to residential housing, one key item is how we measure setbacks, and this is something that has come up frequently in our neighborhoods. We're proposing that setbacks be measured from the property line to the building foundation rather than the overhang or the eave. We're also proposing that some types of housing in some zoning districts, we step away from a minimum lot size or area per unit and instead use a density standard or the number of homes per acre. This will provide flexibility in lot and unit configuration while essentially achieving the same goal as minimum lot size or lot area, but emphasizes form, function, and impact over rigid standards. So for R1, there's three main changes. The minimum lot size has been reduced from 7,500 to 5,500 square feet. Two-family homes are allowed without a separation requirement. Again, that's where the duplexes currently had to be 1,400 feet apart, and they're only about 150 feet apart. Well, we're not, they could be right next door. And then a density standard that reflects the minimum lot size. Triplexes are allowed on at least 10,000 square feet lots to allow for that missing middle housing that already exists in those neighborhoods today. For R2, we begin scaling single-family lot sizes to allow for more homes in a zoning district that's intended to have more density. So we're going to medium density. Setbacks are also modified to reflect flexibility that's been requested and granted in other neighborhoods in the city. And then one new thing that we didn't talk about in December, but just came up recently, is modest changes to the mobile home park zoning district to bring those into alignment with the R2 district standards, since areas zoned mobile home park district are also guided medium density residential in the comprehensive plan. River Falls Mobile Home Park is thinking about adding some units, and so this also gave us an opportunity to look at that and say, well, this is essentially an R2 neighborhood, and so trying to bring those things into alignment. And then for the R3 district, keeps the single family lot scale size from R2, doesn't have an upper limit on the number of 2-family or multifamily units, but that's determined by setbacks, parking, stormwater, and other site conditions, that physical feasibility piece of the site, and then makes the same setback changes for single, 2, and multifamily homes as was proposed for R2. So that allows for more housing in areas where water, sewer, and roadway infrastructure can support more residents. And then another key piece with the multifamily is the change to the amenity and open space standards. So as I mentioned earlier, that was kind of the largest area of flexibility that's been requested when we've had multifamily projects recently. So we looked at what amenities have been provided in our multifamily neighborhoods and created a menu of options that a project could provide. So that's what's summarized here. And then the number of amenities required for each project would be based on the number of units. So the more units you have, the more amenities are required, but they can still pick and choose which are going to be provided for each particular project to make that work. And then we're also proposing that we do retain the 1-to-1 open space standard, but as an option and not a requirement for all projects. And then if undeveloped open space is provided at 1 square foot of floor area to 2 square feet of open space, then half of the required amenities would be needed. So going from 1-to-1 to 1-to-2, then you just need half of it. So you're still preserving some just open space, then you can have fewer amenities. We're also proposing that projects that provide affordable housing receive a credit or a reduction in required amenities. And then lastly, knowing that some of these multifamily projects may be redevelopment or infill within the city with site constraints, we're also proposing that the proximity and connection to existing public open space amenities be recognized. And then the last piece on that multifamily is the parking standards. So here we're trying to right-size parking requirements based on existing projects in the city, standards that other communities use, and thinking about locations that may have available on-street parking for visitors versus those that need to provide some off-street parking for guests. So that was the big residential chunk. Any questions on that? I could go back to stuff if you do, or they'll keep moving along. So a few other items have popped up over time, as I mentioned, that we'd like to take this opportunity to address. So I'll be going through these briefly as well. So for accessory uses and shade structures, we're providing a separate definition for an accessory building and accessory use just to provide more clarity and administration of the zoning code. For shade structures, issues have arisen around structures like pergolas and gazebos that are open on the sides. And the code currently doesn't differentiate between those and sheds where you might be storing a lawnmower or gasoline. And so right now, if you have a gazebo, it has to be the same separation as a shed, but they're a completely different character of structure. So we're differentiating those to, again, recognize that and provide more flexibility that has been asked for by our residents. For driveway width, our current ordinance limits driveway widths to 25 feet at the right-of-way or the property line. And where we have homes with 3-car garages, there have been erosion issues as people try to maneuver into their third stall. And then we also have instances where people have simply widened their driveways without a permit because it's a surmountable curb. But that wider driveway hasn't created any issues. And so someone may come in and say, well, I've got a 3-car garage. I want to widen my driveway. My neighbor did it. And we're like, well, because you asked, we can't let you do that. But then trying to go back and make everybody else come into compliance doesn't make sense. So here we're saying, let's just change the code to something that is going to make more sense and be a better fit. And then the final handful of proposed changes, we're clarifying that residential buildings, particularly single and 2-family homes, need to have at least one front door facing the street. So again, for that community character. We don't have an expiration date for site plan review. It's an oversight where other approvals have a time limit, so we're proposing a deadline for that. We regulate window signs, but don't have a definition for them. So again, clarity for zoning administration. And then finally, at the workshop, the Plan Commission discussed and then recommended using the parking standards that we have for the corporate park zoning district and applying those same standards in I-1 and I-2 zoning districts. So that removes a parking minimum, but adds other performance standards. So we have added language to do that. So that's it. So the next steps are to have any further discussion on all of the items we covered this evening and decide if you're ready to make a recommendation to council regarding the proposed amendments. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Emily. Well, I'll take a motion on this. So here's how many different was
So
there?
we
6?
have 6 different pieces of the package, and they were put together that way because they're in different sections of the ordinance. So kind of keeping the same items in with that.
Would the commission, is the commission comfortable making one motion for all 6? Or do you want to?
I will make one motion for all 6.
Okay.
I recommend that we send the 6 packets on to City Council with a recommendation that they be approved.
Okay, first and second, questions? Any questions? Go ahead.
I guess I don't have any. I just had a conversation with Emily before the meeting to just get some clarification about some things, about how we should be looking at these things, because we're talking about, it's, maybe you can help me out with what you told me about how to look at the various lot sizes, because we're taking elements of R1, 2, and 3 and kind of putting them in, kind of mix and matching them, and that was what was throwing me off. But we should be thinking about it differently with regard to density and lot size. And so I don't know, for clarification for people listening, if you could.
Sure. Because if you might be thinking R1 is only detached single family homes, no other housing type. R2 would be starting to get the attached family, and then R3 is just apartments. And what we're saying is our current ordinance already mixes and matches within each R1, R2, and R3. So in R3, you can have single family homes already. And so we're keeping that pattern, but we're tailoring it more to R1 lower density, R2 medium density, R3 high density, regardless of housing type. So if you have single family homes in R3, you may have smaller homes on smaller lots, so you can have more homes in the same area in a neighborhood. Versus in R1, you can have duplexes and triplexes, but they may need to be on slightly larger lots. So you can still have a mix of housing types in one neighborhood, because that was that map that shows that we already have that dispersed. But the number of homes in an R1 is going to be fewer than in R2 or in R3 if you've got a certain acreage area. Does that help?
I think what it does is it kind of changes the generic terms of 1, 2, and 3. And I don't know if that's just becoming kind of standard, and developers know that, and people in the community are going to start to know that, because those generic terms, we have kind of an iconic view of what kind of housing goes into each, but as illustrated by history, we have mixed them, and we're just bringing that into the ordinance. And
yes, but I'll clarify it. You still won't have a project like the Uplands in an R1 zoning district.
Right.
It would be in an R3 zoning district. Yep.
Okay. And that's kind of what I was
Yes.
hoping.
Yes.
My understanding is that, if developers want to come in with a more traditional, this is the lot size, kind of build according to that, they're free to do so. It's just, this gives more flexibility as to how the different zones are differentiated, and a little more, perhaps gives some room for some creativity.
The other thing I like about it too is it just helps me to have conversations with people, which I appreciate, having reacted to this because of recent months and community feedback. And I think we're in a better position to explain ourselves and explain how this works, and how it is going to improve some of the things we're looking for with regard to housing numbers and things like that. So
I agree. I think it's going to help clarify a lot of things. I like the concept that it'll make the process for developers and for staff a lot easier, because we don't have to go through a lot of extra hearings doing PUDs and everything. This will help with a lot of that. And I appreciate all the time you guys put in this, and I appreciate the extra time the commission has put into this to understand it, going to the workshops, and spending time talking about this. So I think it's fantastic. It needs to be done. So
thanks for the heavy lift
Yeah.
that staff did. I know
Yeah.
it was a lot of
a
work.
lot of work.
Our regards to Harvey.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Any more questions or comments? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Next we'll go on to Emily will give us planning update.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to provide Plan Commission with an overview of the adopted council strategic initiatives that were adopted last fall and will be ongoing through June of 2027. And the strategic initiatives reflect the council's vision and intent, while also maintaining continuity with successful efforts from the 2023 to 2025 strategic initiatives. And then align with planning efforts that the council has been through in retreats and workshops and their council priorities. The strategic initiatives fall under the same 4 categories that were established by the council strategic planning years ago, and those are connected community, economic vitality, financial sustainability, and quality municipal services. So for connected community, there's 3 key strategic initiatives, being the Kinnickinnic River Corridor Plan Phase 1, Safe Streets Action Plan, and Glen Park Phase 2, moving into further park improvements there. And then there's 3 initiatives under economic vitality, downtown project, where we're looking at the issues and opportunities to do reconstruction of infrastructure downtown to continue to maintain the vitality of our downtown and strengthen the infrastructure there. Continued infill in our corporate parks, and then the St. Croix Valley Business Innovation Center expansion, because it was built with the intent that it be expanded, and we're looking at some opportunities to do that now. For financial sustainability, there's 1 key effort to examine city impact fees, and this would include sewer and water connection and park, library, and fire impact fees that are collected with development. And then lastly, for quality municipal services, there's 4 key initiatives, being the fire station remodel, library remodel and capital campaign, which is currently underway, public safety communications upgrade, and a public utility infrastructure assessment. So any questions on those major projects? So some of those things may have something to do with Plan Commission, but again, just wanted to give you an idea of what those big initiatives are that we're focused on for the next couple of years. And then a couple of other announcements. We need to shift 2 meetings this year due to elections. So the April Plan Commission meeting would shift from Tuesday, April 7th to Wednesday, April 8th. And then the November Plan Commission meeting would shift from Tuesday, November 3rd to Wednesday, November 4th. So just shifting those meetings from the first Tuesday to the first Wednesday, April and November. And then finally, we do expect to have a meeting on February 3rd. We might be doing more ordinance amendments. The police department has been working with our city attorney on a couple of issues that have come up, and so we'll have the Plan Commission take a look at those, something a little different next month. With that, I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Emily.
Motion to adjourn.
Like it. Second. All in favor to adjourn?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thanks, Emily.
Thank you.
Is that 2? We had to shift 2 meetings. One was in
April and November.
November.
Yes.
Both, okay.